Hey guys, how was everyone's weekend?
Pretty good. I enjoyed mine a lot. I hung out with a bunch of friends. Maybe I'll tell you guys about it later.
Want to hear more about that. But of course, you all want to hear about me, right? I was the MC at the Salud auction here in the Willamette Valley. It was a lot of fun. This is an organization that brings healthcare directly to vineyards using these amazing mobile medical units. I'd love to tell you more about it maybe some other time. But there was this big barrel tasting at Domaine Serene on Friday. And then I got to put on a super fancy dress and jabber into a microphone at the Ritz Carlton on Saturday. And guess what, guys? Zoe Davis was there with her mom, who happens to be a grower and winemaker. So that was really cool.
Oh, hey, do you mean Zoe, whose email address is zoe@theforetop.org? Zoe Davis, sales manager? Zoe Davis, who sells sponsorships for the Foretop?
My wife's name is Zoe, so I think we should be really clear about spelling here because people do sometimes try to spell her name with an EY at the end. So, if wineries want a direct line into the ears of wine industry insiders, they should really email ZOE, that's ZOE, at theforetop.org.
I feel like you guys are kind of taking over this conversation. I mean, I think we were talking about me and Saturday. what
Uh,
what
well,
you're like
just,
So no one
redirecting.
really wanted to listen to Catherine anyway. So our listeners
yeah,
want to
yeah.
listen to us. And let me tell you,
hmm
Nick, if I owned a business in the wine industry and wanted to really tap into the younger demographic of wine enthusiasts and professionals, I would definitely sponsor the Foretop.
by emailing Zoe at theforetop.org. It's just so affordable. You can't afford not to do it.
Okay, that's cool. That's enough about you guys. But let's talk about me.
Mm,
We don't have to.
no, I'll just shoot an email to Zoe at theforetop.org. Guys, I'd love to tell you about my weekend.
Oh my gosh, I was gonna talk about my weekend, but you go first.
Well, can I talk about my weekend?
Feels like you already did that. Anyway, this weekend I ran a marathon of sorts, one that I made up with my friends.
Wow, I didn't know you could run 26 whole miles. Congratulations, Nick.
Yeah, that's cool.
Not exactly. It was really only 2.8 miles.
Oh,
So not really, but it was full of Odyssey-like trials. So basically, we set up a course that consisted of 4 laps around my friend's farm. And as you completed each lap, you had to take part in some sort of challenge to earn points. The idea being, if you run the fastest, you're not going to win because you have to do challenges to earn more points. So
cool.
the fastest runner doesn't necessarily win. But let me tell you about these challenges. First, you had to score a cup in beer pong against my friend Mike for 100 points. Or you could beat my wife Zoe in flip cup for another 100 points. You could peel a potato for mashed potatoes for dinner later for another 50 points. You had to run a half lap with an egg on a spoon for another 100 points. And then there were points awarded for taking shots of a nasty blue colored liqueur, which I don't even know what it was. Or you got 20 points for doing a grandma's apple pie shot, which is where you lay on the ground and someone pours apple brandy into your mouth and then some whipped cream and then some cinnamon, and you have to drink that.
Whoa, that sounds like so much fun.
That's a marathon.
I actually might I shouldn't say this on on the record, but one of my daughters did run a beer mile. So I'm familiar with this setup and all I have to say is props to you. I'm so impressed.
Yeah, this is like a beer mile, but it's a beer marathon. But essentially, it's a beer marathon. It's a lot of fun though.
Love it. I love it.
What about your weekend, Ruby? What'd you get up to?
Oh, I had a really eventful Saturday. Actually, I had a really eventful weekend, but my Saturday afternoon started with the most recent Chardonnay event with Megan, who we spoke
Hmm.
to a few episodes back. So we went to a new wine bar that I believe is called Heaven and Earth. And then my friend who I brought to Chardonnay got invited to this launch party for a zine for the Instagram account called Girls Carrying Shit, which I'm not sure if
Hmm.
you're familiar with this Instagram account, but
No,
it's a lot of fun.
have to look it up.
And what was so interesting was that it was a non-alc party, so it was actually sponsored by Gia, I believe, and instead of alcohol, they had, um, recreational drugs, and that was, like, a first for me where it was just, like, out on tables. It was pretty
Whoa.
interesting. There was, like in the middle of the room, there was, like, branded, are you familiar with Edie Parker?
No.
Okay, so it's like a branded weed paraphernalia company. Very cute, very trendy. They had little rolling papers with like flowers on it. There was like individual packets of mushroom capsules. There was a bong slash s'mores table outside by the bonfire. It was a lot of fun.
Did you have to sign some sort of liability waiver before you walked into this party? I mean, this sounds insane.
I did not.
I love how it's like no alcohol, but here's unlimited weed.
Yeah, I just thought it was so interesting, and I love Gia. I actually, like, buy it on my own. But, yeah, I just thought it was so funny, and it was clearly sponsored by all of these other companies, like, by Edie Parker, and also the shroom company was called Schedule 35. It's, like, a legit company and everything. So, yeah, it
Wow.
was really cool, and, there was lots of information about, like, how to use all of this stuff responsibly, and, yeah, it was a good time.
Anyways, you guys want to talk about wine news now?
Oh, yeah. Is that why we're here?
I
Yeah.
guess so.
Yeah.
Trump tariffs have some terrified. It's not phylloxera, it's late frosts and freak storms. Workers allege toxic waste in winegrowers' waterways. And the Aussies go aeronautical with aeration. I'm Catherine Cole. I never cease to be amazed by Nick's intro writing. And I am joined by Nick Toole and Ruby Welkovich, and this is your favorite wine news podcast, The Four Top. So, guys, we haven't yet talked about the election. How are you guys feeling?
Uh, it, I'm in a waking dream, and
Hmm.
it's not the best dream I've ever had.
Yeah, I've been pretty down this week. When we were not recording last week, I believe before the podcast, I was talking about how confident I was for a different outcome of this election and how excited I was by that outcome. And that did not happen. So, yeah, it's been quite a bummer.
Well, I have been clinging to a news article that I read last Wednesday. It really gave me hope for the entire nation. And that article was about the fact that you can make a margarita with red wine. So I'm seeing some hope in that. Anyway, here at the Four Top, we do have feelings, but we report the facts as they pertain to the wine industry. And looking at the election results, we are looking at putting red wine into our margaritas, but we're also wondering about tariffs. So, back in 2019, folks may remember under the last Trump presidency, I actually remember covering this. There was a round of 25% tariffs that were targeted at agricultural imports. Now, those hit the wine industry really hard. And so now we're all wondering again, will these be reintroduced?
Well, we do know that when Trump returns to office, he has promised to impose 10 to 20% tariffs across the board on imports. This will, of course, raise prices for consumers, but Trump argues that it will level the playing field in other ways.
Well, whatever his reasonings, our question is what is the tariff outlook on the wine industry?
We are going to phone a friend. Harman Skurnik is treasurer of the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance. You may also recognize his name from the vaunted import firm Skurnik Wines and Spirits. Welcome, Harman.
Thank you, Catherine. Good to be here.
All right, so we have you on here to talk about the potential for looming tariffs under Trump now that he has been elected. So, when he's inaugurated on January 20th, what should the wine industry expect?
Well, the odds of a tariff going into place, I think, is all but certain. The question is, what will be tariffed? And as far as we are concerned in the wine industry, we're going to make a very strong argument that tariffing wine is a really bad product to tariff. And I think that we have a very good argument there. But the odds of tariffs going into place, primarily targeted at European markets or European products, is very, very high, if not all but certain, because that's what he campaigned on. And we have a track record with the past time that he was in the White House where they followed through on a 25% tariff, as many of your listeners probably are aware, for a short period of time until the Biden administration came in and paused it for 5 years. But during that time, it created a lot of damage. I think there was something like $239 million of tariffs were collected from American companies. And it was only over 15 months. So we can only imagine if we go 4 years of tariffs, what that'll cost the wine industry, American businesses, and then ultimately consumers.
Harmon, you said from American companies. So, one thing our listeners may not be aware of is that the tariff is actually collected from the importer, correct?
Yes, I think this is a misconception, and it's an intentional misconception. I can only imagine from the campaigning Republicans that they sort of suggest or even outright say that the foreign countries pay the tariffs, but nothing could be further from the truth. The tariffs are collected when the goods reach the port through customs, and American companies pay those tariffs. Now, the wine business, I wouldn't say it's unique, but those of you who are in the wine business or are familiar with it know that we have what's called a three-tier system. And by law, the wines that are imported to the United States has to be imported by an American company. The importer must be American. The importer then sells primarily to an American distributor. It has to be owned by an American. And then it's sold to a retailer. It has to be owned by an American company. So that's not true for other European goods. Let's say, a French luxury company that makes handbags, for example.
Hmm.
They sell to a company in America, but it's owned by a French company. They have a retailer in America, it's owned by a French company. So we did a study at the US Wine Trade Alliance that says that every dollar that's spent in Europe on wine produces $4.52 of revenue to American companies. So it's not an even trade. If you tariff wine, you're hurting American businesses and small businesses primarily, and family-owned businesses much more than you are hurting the targeted country. And that's a very powerful argument that we and our lobbyists that we've hired are making to Washington, D.C. legislators.
Wow. So, how soon do you expect these tariffs to be imposed once Trump has entered office?
Well, soon. I mean, I think that, he's got to appoint his cabinet. These folks have to be in place, but a lot of them are being appointed already. And it takes, it may take several weeks or several months, but we think that by March or April, we'll know whether or not these tariffs have been implemented and whether or not wine will be on the list. Our goal at the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance is to say that we would have no chance in trying to convince this administration that tariffs are bad and they should not implement them. But we are going to argue very, very strongly, and we have been for months already because we've been preparing for this moment. We are going to argue that tariffs on wine are a really poor choice to accomplish your goals, and we are going to try to convince them to leave wine off the list. And we think it's a very realistic goal that we can achieve that.
Hypothetically, if wine is on the list, will wine prices increase immediately?
Based on the last time this happened, it's not that immediate because, most importers and wholesalers like ourselves, we have a lot of inventory in stock already. And so that inventory is not tariffed.
Mhm.
It's the new goods that come in. As they come in, the costs go up significantly as a result of the tariffs. And then, of course, we pass it on into our pricing because we have no choice but to do that.
And Harmon, I seem to recall there was some fine print about the alcohol by volume and that kind of thing. And so producers were getting around the tariffs 5 years ago by like watering down their wine. Do you think that might be the case again, where there might be some fine print and some ways to work around?
The old saying is past performance is no guarantee of future results. So that a lot of people say, well, what was implemented last time doesn't necessarily apply this time. They realized that there was that loophole, and I don't think they'll repeat that again.
Yeah.
Also, you need to understand that there are two major trade disputes that are at play here. One is the Airbus Boeing dispute, which was what the 25% tariff was applied to last time.
Right.
That's on pause until 2026. We don't think that that's going to be the first thing that gets re-implemented. The current danger for tariffs specifically towards European products, which is the primary supplier of imported wine to this country, is what's called the digital services tax dispute. Without getting too much into the weeds, digital services are comprised of companies like Google, Apple, Amazon, who operate in Europe. They're almost entirely American companies. And the EU has decided to tax those companies significantly over the last several years. And the Trump administration feel that it's very discriminatory. So they're going to go after those countries probably first, is what we think. And just to give you an idea, that issue came up 4 years ago. It never got implemented, but the proposal was 100% tariff on all champagne. I don't know if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It never actually came into fruition because of the Biden election. I mean, 100% tariff on anything just kills the product completely.
Yeah, and to give our listeners some context, I'm sure some people are scratching their head over Boeing and Airbus. What does that have to do with wine and tech? But the point was culturally significant products that don't just hurt countries like France financially, but also kind of hurt emotionally. You know, champagne is just core to the French identity, right?
Absolutely. And that just leads to another kind of argument that we are using in our trying to convince people in Congress that this is a really bad idea, is the concept of fungibility. To give you an example of what fungibility is, if they tariff a product like steel, for example, steel made in America is essentially the same product as steel made in China or anywhere else. And so if you put 100% tariff on steel made in China, they can buy American steel. Maybe that's an effective method of promoting American products. But using the example of champagne, you can produce sparkling wine anywhere, but it's not champagne. And so the idea that, let's say, an Italian restaurant whose business is dependent on authentic Italian cuisine, they need to have authentic Italian wines to go with it. You got to have Chianti, and you have to have Barolo, and you have to have the real thing.
Yeah, I've been hearing folks in the domestic industry saying, well, maybe if tariffs are imposed, that will boost American wine sales. But what you're saying is they're not interchangeable. And in fact, I mean, it's possible that consumers will just say, oh, wine's so much more expensive these days, and just stop buying wine altogether.
Well, that's a possible outcome. But I think what's interesting to me and to us is that I would say at least 90% of American wine producers are against tariffs as well.
Yeah.
You would think that, like you said, maybe something like that would be good for American wine producers. But because of the three-tier system, American wine producers need to sell to local wholesalers around the country. And if the wholesalers are unhealthy financially because they have to pay 100% tariffs or whatever the percentage ends up being, and it hurts their business, that hurts the ability for the wholesaler to buy American wine. So they're with us on this. We have a lot of American producers who are joining us in helping us make that argument to Congress that wine is really a bad product to tariff. We knew that the possibility of Trump being elected was there. And that's why we've been preparing for the last 6 months for this eventuality with the best lobbyists that Washington, D.C. can offer, and with a PR agency, Colangelo, who's well known in the restaurant world. But these kinds of efforts are expensive. So what's really heartening to me is that if you get 1,000 wine importers and wholesalers and retailers and restaurant owners in a room to agree on one thing, you probably would have a really difficult time. But if you talk about tariffs, it's something that we all are in unison and unified about. And so we're prepared to fight this fight, and we're going to do it until we win, we hope.
I like it.
Yeah.
Hope that gave you some optimism.
Yes.
There is a Facebook page for the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance, which I would recommend your listeners go to get some information about this. And I can also be reached. My email address is hs@skurnik.com. Skurnik is spelled Skurnik, no C. And, we can give you information on how you can join the fight. We can use all the help we can get. And a lot of the fight is in local markets all over the country, where these influential Congress people's local constituents are, anywhere in the country could be. So we can arrange for events to try to educate these Congress people on why they should support our cause.
Well, thank you so much, Harman Skurnik, treasurer of the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good
so
luck
much.
with everything.
Thank you for all you're doing and all that the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance is doing.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Import, export, any port in a storm. In other import news, the French may soon be importing Native American grapevines after their worst harvest in years.
That's right, and to understand how big this news is, we should turn back the clock to the early 20th century, when France banned various American vine varieties, mostly hybrids, because they apparently produced wine so foul that they smelled like crushed bedbugs. I guess in the 20th century they would know what that smelled like, or foxes, and, so the French said, they caused blindness and madness. Or it could have just been methanol folks were adding to their wines. That was probably more likely.
Just some classic early 20th century fake news and mass hysteria. I'm really glad we've moved past that.
Yeah, we don't do any fake news or mass hysteria anymore, do we?
Mm-mm.
So to
No.
so to continue the history lesson, European wine grape varieties are derived from, as we all know here on the foretop, the Vitis vinifera species, whereas in the United States we have several indigenous grape varieties as well as hybrids or cross species blends, if you will. So the cultivars that France has its sights on derive from these American grape variety species, and they have names like Clinton, Noah, Herbamont, and Jacques.
Sounds like someone like Chris Martin named these grapes.
Or Kanye West.
Well, yeah, speaking of Kanye West, the French really do have a tortured history with these hybrid
Oh.
with these hybrid American grape varieties because back in the late 1850s, the French brought American grapevines over on steamships so they could, experiment with them in their vineyards. And this was a time when American growers were having really good luck with these native grape varieties because they were super hardy. And they were actually a really big deal here. For example, I remember researching this for my book, Sparkling Wine Anytime. In the mid 1800s, Americans could not get enough of sparkling wine made from the Catawba grape and produced in Ohio and New York. I kid you not.
So the French were like, give me some of that.
Yeah. So the French imported these hardy, fast growing American vines, but these vines had a nasty little secret, or rather, nasty little root lice called phylloxera. They didn't harm the American vines, but they chowed down on the French grape varieties and absolutely demolished French viticulture.
I mean, the bottom line here is that Vitis vinifera grapes just taste better, and the phylloxera, they have really good taste. They came over to France, they were like, these grapes taste good. We're going to eat them, and then we're going to eat them all.
So that really ticked off the French. And then they got even more frustrated when they figured out that the only vines that were resistant to phylloxera were the same American vines that infected them with it. So they had to import even more American vines so that they could replant all their Vitis vinifera onto American rootstock.
And then a lot of growers simply planted the American grape varieties outright, and then there was a grape glut. The government wanted to curb overproduction and prop up prices at the request of the wine merchants, and these newfangled American vines were an easy target. The French government banned them in 1934.
Righto. Now back to present day. So, according to the Times of London this week, the French Agricultural Ministry is reporting that the 2024 vintage will produce 23% less wine than last year. Woof. They blame a late frost, historic hailstorms, powdery mildew, vine disease, heavy rains, and a lack of sunshine for the drop. So basically, a biblically bad growing year.
Enter stage right, the Deus ex machina here, these indigenous American vine varieties and hybrids. They've known all along these guys are apparently resistant to drought, excess rainfall, and powdery mildew. They could be the cure France needs for its climate change related weather woes.
As we all know, the French are especially prideful, so they must be hurting if they're even considering using American vines. One winemaker actually said to the Times of London, quote, I never understood the farmers who wanted to commit suicide. Now I do. So, yeah, they're definitely feeling the heat.
Oh my God. Did someone really say that? Okay.
Yep.
The chairman of the Committee of Protected Designation of Origin Wines says that not a single meeting goes by without these resistant vines being discussed. And that's a big deal.
Wow, so history may repeat itself. This is really interesting, and we will be keeping an eye on this story for sure. Guys, Guys, you know what I miss? I miss those days when rivers would just like catch fire because they were so polluted. As someone who lives right on a river, I got to tell you, all this clean water I see every day, it's kind of boring. I miss that frisson, that excitement of, will the river catch fire today or won't it?
Well, Catherine, don't you worry. It sounds like the Clover Flat landfill in Napa is bringing those days back. Just head on down to the Napa River with a lighter, and your dream will come true.
Okay, listeners, we're kidding here, but hey, if you cannot face the unthinkable with a sense of humor, then what can you do?
And this news is as awful as it sounds. 15 employees of the Clover Flat Landfill and Upper Valley Disposal Service allege that the operators of the landfill have been intentionally diverting untreated wastewater full of bacteria, pathogens, nitrates, and heavy metals into the Napa River for decades.
They did this too, of course, save a buck. The owners apparently wanted to avoid paying to have the untreated wastewater properly shipped to a facility for safe disposal, so instead, they polluted an important water resource for agriculture and the community.
This also created some very unsafe working conditions for the employees, and in spectacular fashion, ownership did not provide those employees with the proper protective equipment to deal with the nastiness in the wastewater.
I feel like there's a certain class of people who just do not think that the rules and laws apply to them. All right, guys, who's to blame? Whose house shall I go egg right now?
Catherine, don't waste any eggs. But if you want to drive by with your middle finger out, I'd set your GPS to Waste Connections. They're a
Okay.
nationwide waste management company, and they couldn't be reached for comment, of course.
Clover Flat Landfill is actually closing soon, in part because of public pressure regarding their numerous regulatory violations. Apparently, the landfill's groundwater and liquid wastewater, along with water from a nearby creek, are chock full of PFAs, which is short for, let's just say, really toxic chemicals. Yum.
I'd hate to think that they could just get away with this by closing, but maybe that's what they're trying to do. The employees that allege the illegal dumping have filed a $500 million lawsuit and allege that they were forced to drain the untreated wastewater into nearby waterways by way of a network of ghost pipes, and that they were made to spray some of the wastewater onto compost that was labeled as organic.
And then that quote, organic compost was sold off to be used in the production of grapeseed oil, which people cook with.
Oh man, I feel like I'm running out of breath listening off all these accusations. But there are more. The workers were also told to spray that wastewater on dirt roads for dust control and wash down their heavy machinery with it and dump it along rural highways in Napa Valley.
Nick, don't hurt yourself. I can take the load
Oof.
from here. Apparently, the landfill operators also accepted hazardous waste that they weren't designated to accept, like syringes, human blood, and excrement, and even radioactive military waste.
Oh my goodness. This is a lot. I feel like I just need to see my therapist and talk about this, but instead I'm going to wrap this up. It turns out that the Clover Flat landfill has been operating in a pretty shitty fashion for a while now. They got in trouble back in 2019 for running a pipeline from the landfill directly into a nearby creek. Then in 2022, they discharged 40,000 gallons of contaminated stormwater into a nearby stream and were hit with a about $620,000 fine. So, we don't yet know how this new lawsuit will pan out, but I do hope there is hell to pay. Whew, after that, do you guys want to end on an easy one? I mean, the news is so heavy these days.
Yes, please. That would be really nice.
All right, let's do it. So, recently we talked about the new cocoon shaped wine glass. So, I'm here to tell you there's another new glass shape that we all need to know about.
Ooh, fun.
Or intense. So, a Melbourne based glassware producer, Denver and Liley, has launched a new $130 wine glass inspired by, wait for it, commercial jet engines. You know about cult wines. Well, this is the cult wine glass.
Whoa. Okay, I thought this was going to be a nice, chill story, but you're right. That sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, apparently it took Denver and Liley 8 years to design and test the glass before launching it this month. They say it offers, and I quote, the world's most controlled wine experience. Okay.
All right, based on past glassware innovations we've discussed, I'm guessing their mission was to increase aeration?
I guess so. Yeah, they wanted to mimic the art of decanting without actually decanting. I feel like I hear that all the time. But apparently, the trick with this Denver and Lively glass is if you swirl your wine in a counterclockwise fashion, you aerate more aggressively, and that's best for younger wines. But then if you swirl your wine in a clockwise direction, the aeration is lighter, and that's for older or more delicate wines.
I'm sorry, but can I just get a normal wine glass that I don't have to think about? Like, I'm used to drinking out of mason jars.
Seriously. Yeah, to be honest, I'm with you, Ruby. Maybe I don't actually want the world's most controlled wine experience. Maybe I just want to put the wine in my pie hole.
To be fair, I'm looking at a picture of this thing and it does look beautiful. I'm coming up on 4 years with the Four Top, maybe a little anniversary gift?
Not until I get my cider.
All right, it's time for our question of the week. And in the spirit of Halloween, which feels like honestly it was 10,000 years ago, we asked our listeners and followers, what scares you most about the wine industry?
Yeah, so what keeps our listeners awake at night? Well, for at Wine 101 Hamden, it's quote, Wine Bros. Me too.
Yeah, and for Daniel Schaefer Studio, it's the fact that it's easier for restaurants to source wines from overseas than locally produced wines. But maybe the future Trump tariffs will solve that problem, just trying to put a positive spin on it.
Well, Sunny Adams 666 Devil Girl. Jeez, what a name. Okay, Devil Girl is scared by the looming import tax, which we actually discussed on this episode.
Yep. And finally, Bottle Trip Wines is worried about, quote, people drinking less wine because they can't afford it due to capitalist caused imbalances. Oh, and then one more. Wine Guy Gary is scared of simply, quote, ego. Ain't that the truth, Wine Guy Gary?
Well, what should we ask this week? How about how will the looming Trump tariffs affect the wine industry?
Yeah, I'm sure our listeners will have a lot of thoughts about that, and we look forward to hearing from them, even if they're wine bros. And now it's time for the segment of our podcast where we share a little figurative dessert. And I think we have a dessert recommendation from Harmon Skurnick. Harmon, what is your dessert item for our listeners?
What I've been really interested in lately is treating champagne as the wine it deserves to be. A lot of people over the course of many, many decades, have considered champagne a kind of a luxury drink that you should have when you celebrate something, and that's all I think about. But champagne is a wine first and foremost, and it is probably the most versatile wine that exists on the planet to go with food, I think. So I've been drinking a lot of champagne with my meals, and it's something I don't think a lot of Americans do, but more should, because it's just so delicious. I mean, when my wife and I go out for a sushi dinner, we always order a bottle of champagne with it. And more and more we're drinking champagne with dinner. Nothing goes better with fried foods, fried chicken, even French fries, even fast food. So it's something that I think a lot of Americans don't understand, that it is a wine that's meant to go with food.
Well, cheers to that. Thank you, Harmon.
It's my pleasure.
This has been the Four Top Podcast. I am our executive producer, Catherine Cole.
I'm our producer, Nick Toole.
I'm our media and design manager, Ruby Welkovich.
Keelan King is the composer and performer of our theme music. Please visit our website, thefourtop.org, to learn more about us, listen to back episodes, and learn how to sponsor our work, which might be important. I think it is important. So do it.
If you have not already subscribed to The Four Top on iTunes or Spotify, please do so, and please leave us a rating.
Hey y'all, this is important. Every rating feeds the algorithm and helps new listeners find the Four Top.
Well, from the United States of America, where I'm just hanging out with my grape friends, Clinton, Noah, Herbamont, Jacques, and Catawba, this is Catherine signing out.
From a hobbit hole deep in the Shire of my mind, this is Nick signing out.
And from my apartment in Brooklyn, New York, where I have so many goodie bags from this weekend that I took from my parties, this is Ruby signing out. Stay safe.
Are the goodie bags full of drugs?
Maybe. I don't know. Stay safe out there, and thanks for listening.
Keep it clean, people.